She owned the building, every chair, every chandelier, every inch of marble under her feet. And the man behind the front desk looked at her, at the worn bag, the canvas snakesers, the frayed hoodie, and decided. In less than 3 seconds, the metal card placed on the counter, tapped twice, like testing a coin for hollow. The ID held under the lamp, tilted, turned over, examined far longer than any of this required. This could be fraudulent. 14,000 people watching. The police already called. A reservation paid in full. 9 months ago, $16,800, and she hadn't moved an inch. Maya Caldwell owned the hotel. Every chair, every chandelier, every inch of marble on that floor. And at 11:45 on a Tuesday night, the man behind the desk looked at her and decided she needed to leave. This is that night. She was in seat 2A when the feeling started, not the incident. The feeling, that low, familiar hum behind her sternum that said, "Pay attention, something is coming." The flight from New York to Chicago was 2 hours and 12 minutes. She had taken it 47 times in 3 years. She knew which beverage cart came first. She knew the exact moment the city lights appeared below the clouds on a clear night. She's that seat 2A had 3 more inches of legroom than 2B. And the window seal on the left side of the fuselage rattled faintly during the descent, and the flight attendants on the Tuesday evening route almost always ran out of the sparkling water before they reached the back half of the cabin. She knew this flight. What she hadn't anticipated was the attendant stopping at her row, looking down at her, and saying what she said next. "Excuse me, ma'am." A pause, the kind with weight in it. "Are you sure you're in the right section?" Maya looked up from her notebook. The woman was young, blonde ponytail, smile trained to stay fixed, regardless of what came out of her mouth. She had the look of someone who had been told many times that her job was about making people comfortable, and who had not yet fully worked out that this applied to all the people. Maya didn't answer immediately. She looked at the woman, then at the seat number above her head, then back at the woman. She reached into the front pocket of her canvas bag and pulled out her boarding pass. Held it up, said nothing. The attendant read it, blinked once, twice. "Oh, a breath. I'm so sorry, I didn't." "I apologize. It's fine," Maya said, says she tucked the boarding pass back, clicked her pen, returned to her notebook. The attendant moved on. Maya wrote one line in the margin. "Pay attention tonight, because this was not the first time." It was, by her count, the 4th time in 9 months that someone had looked at her and concluded, in the space of a breath, that she was somewhere she didn't belong. And tonight was the select site she had decided to see what that looked like from the inside of her own company. Here is what Maya Caldwell was wearing on the night of December 17th, 2025. A gray hoodie, washed so many times the drawstrings had frayed at both ends. Dark jeans with a small bleach stain near the left knee from a cleaning supply accident in her first apartment 16 years ago. Canvas sneakers that had logged more miles than she'd bothered to track. A leather messenger bag, the strap repaired twice with a needle and thread because she refused to replace it. No jewelry, no blazer, no car service waiting at O'Hare. She had taken a cab. This was not poverty. This was methodology. In 9 months of owning Sterling Crown Hotel Group, she had learned one thing above all others about how luxury hospitality actually operated on the ground level, as opposed to how it presented itself in quarterly reports and brand positioning decks. People behaved differently when they believed no one important was watching. The performance of service, the warmth, the attentiveness, the careful choreography of making a guest feel chosen required an audience worth performing for. Remove that audience, or appear to remove it, and you saw the thing underneath, the real temperature of the room. So she audited in person, unannounced, dressed like someone with nothing to prove, because that was the whole point. The Chicago location had been flagged 9 months ago, shortly after the acquisition closed. 47 discrimination-related complaints in that same period. The highest liability exposure of any property in the North American portfolio. Her legal team had used the phrase significant risk 3 times in a single memo, which, in team language, meant they were worried. She had been told on 3 separate occasions by 3 separate regional managers that the situation was improving. She said to see what improving looked like at 11:45 on a Tuesday night, when no one knew the owner was coming. She pressed her forehead briefly against the cold window. Below, Chicago spread itself across the dark in amber and white, the lake invisible, but there, a presence at the edge of things. She opened her notebook to a clean page. Wrote nothing yet. Waited. She had been 22 the last time someone had told her she didn't belong somewhere. Not the flight attendant tonight. Before that, a long time before that, Atlanta. A hotel 3 blocks from the interstate. The kind of property that served continental breakfast, but charged extra for orange juice, and had a vending machine at the end of every corridor that was always out of something. She'd been working the night shift for 8 months, restocking ice machines, answering calls from guests who wanted extra pillows or directions to places she'd never been, folding towels with the particular fold the manual specified, which she had memorized on day 2, because she memorized things that mattered, and this she had decided mattered. She was precise, fast. She remembered returning guests' names and their preferences, the small details that cost nothing to hold on to and meant something to the people they belonged to. Her general manager had told her twice that she'd have a future in this industry. And then one Tuesday, her direct supervisor called her into the back office, sat her down, slid a piece of paper across the desk without looking at her. "We're making some changes to staffing presentation standards," he said. "Your image isn't quite what we're going for." Maya looked at the paper, then at him. "What does that mean?" He still didn't look up. "It means we're going in a different direction." She understood, not because he explained it. He was careful not to explain it. Explanations were the kind of thing that left a record, and he wasn't careless. She understood because she had been in that building long enough to watch who got promoted and who didn't, who got the sections with the good tables, and who got the ones near the kitchen. She understood because she had learned in 8 months of night shifts and continental breakfasts and ice machines how to read the things people were too careful to say. She didn't cry on the way to the parking lot. She sat in her car, a 2003 Civic, with a crack running diagonally across the rearview mirror, and opened the spiral notebook she carried everywhere. And she wrote one sentence. "One day, I will be the one who sets the standards." She had kept every notebook since then. 23 of them now, stacked in a box in her office in New York. She had never thrown one away. The cab turned onto Michigan Avenue at 11:39 p.m. December in Chicago, black sky, lights that didn't warm the air, just marked where things were. The cold off the lake was specific and personal, the kind that found the gap between your collar and your jaw. The Sterling Crown rose ahead. 42 stories of glass and steel lit from below in gold. The canopy out front glowed warm. 2 doormen in long coats stood at their posts. She paid in cash, tipped 30%, picked up her bag. Inside, the lobby of Sterling Crown Chicago was, by any measure, beautiful. White marble floors with gray veining that caught the light differently depending on where you stood. Ceilings that climbed 40 feet before reaching a hand-blown glass installation in amber and gold, each piece commissioned individually from a studio in Vermont. A fireplace on the east wall, actually burning. Armchairs in deep green and velvet arranged in clusters, designed to communicate without words that you belonged here, that you were expected, that this was a place worth arriving at. Maya had approved this design, had sat through 6 revision meetings, and argued, at the last one, for the green velvet over the safer gray, because she had stayed seats in enough hotels to know that safe choices made for lobbies. People walked through without looking. She wanted people to look. She stood just inside the entrance and did not look at the design. She looked at the operation. 3 things in the first 30 seconds. 1. 2 front desk employees sharing something on a screen behind the counter and laughing at it with the volume of people who have forgotten there are guests in the room. 2. A wet patch near the far left corner of the floor, recent, spreading slightly at the edges, untouched. 3. An older man standing at the far end of the check-in counter. Alone, waiting. His shoulders had the particular drop that happened after the first 2 minutes of being invisible somewhere you expected to be seen. No one had approached him. She filed all 3, kept walking. She had taken six steps when she saw him. Reed Garner was standing near the concierge alcove with a clipboard under his arm and the bearing of a man who had, over a number of years, come to believe that his read on any situation was both faster and more accurate than anyone else's in the room. Late 30s, dark suit, no tie, hair arranged with something that kept it in place. The posture of someone who needed to be perceived as confident, which was different from the posture of someone who simply was. That difference was visible if you knew what you were looking at. He saw Maya the way a specific kind of person sees something that doesn't match their existing categories, not with curiosity. With the brief, instinctive tightening of someone running a fast assessment and arriving at a fast conclusion. His eyes moved from her face to her shoes and back up. The whole thing took 2 seconds. She watched him decide. He moved toward her before she reached the counter. Smooth, the practiced intercept of someone who had done it before. Good evening. Not unfriendly on the surface, just the shape of friendliness, without the content. We don't have any public events tonight. Maya stopped. I know, she said. I have a reservation on something recalibrated behind his expression. Name, Maya Caldwell. A beat. Penthouse, 5501. Silence. Not the efficient silence of someone cross-referencing a database. The weighted silence of someone deciding how to proceed with information that didn't match their expectations. He looked at her again. Slower this time, starting at the bag. Our penthouse suites, he said, his voice staying level in a way that somehow communicated condescension through pitch alone, start at $2,800 a night. I know, Maya said, just making sure you're aware. She held his gaze. Yes, I prepaid for 6 nights. Nothing behind it. Why don't we get you sorted at the desk? Which sounded like assistance. Was not assistance. Tara Brooks was 24 years old and had worked the night shift at Sterling Crown, Chicago for 11 months. She was competent, quick with the system. She remembered faces and could manage 3 concurrent tasks without any of them visibly suffering. She had been told in her last review that she had just a strong ins for guest registrations, that if she kept developing, she had a real future at the property level. Tonight, she was the one who typed in the name, Mayacaldwell. The record came back in under a second, and Tara looked at it. Then she looked up at the woman standing across the counter, then back at the screen. Something happened in her face. It was small, and she controlled it quickly. But it was there, the specific expression of someone who has just seen something they weren't expecting and is trying to decide what to do with it before anyone notices they've seen it. Maya noticed. She didn't indicate that she'd noticed. She watched Tara's eyes move to Reed, who had positioned himself behind Maya's left shoulder. She watched the younger woman read something in Reed's expression, a preference communicated entirely without words in the half-second before she looked away from the screen. Any issues with the booking? Reed said. Tara hesitated. Verifying. Take your time. His tone said the opposite. He moved around the counter to stand beside Tara and said to Maya with the clipped efficiency of someone's accessing a practiced script, "We'll need a credit card for incidentals." Maya opened her bag, set the card on the counter. The Centurion was matte black and heavier than a standard card, in the way that things are heavier when they're made of metal instead of plastic. There was no spending limit printed on it because the spending limit was a conversation that happened elsewhere, between institutions, not between cardholder and merchant. It was not available to apply for. It arrived by invitation in a box with a letter that began with the word congratulations. Reed picked it up, turned it over, and then he tapped it on the counter. Once, twice. The way you'd test a coin you suspected wasn't solid. The way you'd check whether something was what it claimed to be. This type of card, he said, setting it down without looking at her. There have been fraudulent reproductions in circulation. Maya looked at the card, then at his hand, then at his face. Said nothing. Because she was storing it, the tap of the card, the angle of his shoulders. The practiced casual way he'd said fraudulent. Every word and gesture he did going into the same place she'd been storing things since the parking lot in Atlanta 16 years ago. Pam Odell came out of the back office, the way someone comes out when they've been half listening and have decided it's time to participate. She was 41, practical shoes, reading glasses pushed up onto her head with the air of someone who'd forgotten them there. She moved with the energy of a person who'd been efficient for so long it had become indistinguishable from her personality. Ah! She looked at Maya, not with Reed's bristling defensiveness, with something quieter and in some ways more complete. A rapid sorting process, nearly invisible, that had already finished before she'd crossed the lobby. She had looked at the bags, shoes, and absence of anything that signaled the kind of guest she was accustomed to handling, and she had arrived at a conclusion before she'd asked a single question. Ma'am. Measured. Professional on the surface of it. I'll need to see a government-issued photo ID. Maya produced her Illinois driver's license. Pam took it, held it under the desk lamp, tilted it left, tilted it right, checked the hologram, ran her thumb along the edge, turned it over, spent significantly more time on it than any of these actions required. This could be fraudulent, she announced, not quietly, at a volume the couple in the armchairs could hear. It's an Illinois driver's license, Maya said. I'm aware. Pam handed it back without ceremony, saying the technology exists to replicate them convincingly. And there it was. The particular texture of this kind of treatment, the specific quality Maya had spent her adult life navigating, was that it never announced itself. It didn't arrive wearing its actual name. It dressed itself in procedure, in diligence, in the language of professional caution and institutional responsibility, which meant that the person on the receiving end was left holding something with no clean label, just the weight of it. The accumulated certainty of knowing exactly what was happening and the knowledge that naming it directly would be met with. See? Difficult. See? Exactly what we were worried about. So she stood there, and she waited. Reed's voice had found a new register, the one that came when an audience was watching, and because an audience was forming. It happened in the way these things happen in public spaces, not all at once, by increments. First, the couple in the green velvet chairs, Roy and Bet Langham, mid-60s. Roy in a blazer he'd worn to dinner, Bet in a cream silk blouse, stopped engaging with their phones. Then, a family near the elevator bank paused their conversation. Then, a man in a business suit came through the revolving door with the depleted energy sanely of someone returning from a long day of meetings, stopped inside the entrance when he registered the quality of the stillness at the front desk, and in the far corner of the lobby, settled into a chair beside a large potted olive tree. A 27-year-old woman named Dina Walsh had been for a friend to come downstairs for 40 minutes. Dina was on her third ginger ale. She had been scrolling without reading. She was not, by nature, a person who sat still easily, and the waiting had started to acquire a texture. Then she heard Reed's voice carry across the marble. I've been in this industry for 8 years. The volume calibrated without apparent effort for the room. I can tell how when documentation doesn't align with the guest. Dina put her phone face up on her knee. The woman standing at the counter looked at Reed, looked back at the woman, set down her ginger ale, opened her phone. She didn't say anything, didn't add a caption or a comment or any framing at all. Just pointed the camera at the front desk and tapped live. The counter in the corner of the screen read 11 viewers, then 34, then 91. Darius Webb had spent 9 years reading rooms. It was, in the most practical sense, the job. Understanding the energy of a space, distinguishing between the ordinary friction of late-night hospitality, the complaints, the intoxicated guests that resolved themselves given 3 minutes and the things that required actual intervention. He came around the corner from the service corridor and saw what was happening at the front desk and read the room and felt something was wrong. Not with the guest, with the situation. Something in the alignment of it. The particular configuration of Reed's posture and Pam's expression, and the woman standing across from them with her bag over one shoulder and her face completely unreadable. He had learned to pay attention to that kind of instinct. He approached. Reed turned toward him with the relief of someone who has been waiting for backup and is confident of allegiance. Darius, we've got a situation. He gestured toward Maya with the easy authority of a man who had never had reason to question his own judgments. Guest is having difficulty with the verification process. Darius looked at Maya. She was still, not the stillness of someone who was overwhelmed or frightened. The stillness of someone who was waiting with full knowledge of what they were waiting for. There was a quality to it he couldn't immediately categorize, a precision of composure that didn't match any of the usual profiles. She looked at his name tag. Officer Webb, quiet, exact. Before you do anything, I'd recommend reading your employee handbook. Section 14.3. Darius stopped. I'm sorry? Section 14.3, she said again. Same register. No additional information volunteered. Reed made a sound, dismissive, the audible equivalent of an eye roll. She's been deflecting since she got here. It's a standard tactic. Darius didn't respond to Reed. He looked at Maya. She didn't look like someone deflecting. She looked like someone who had already done the math on this evening and was simply waiting for the room to catch up. He pulled out his phone, opened the HR portal, started reading. Frank Okafor came through the revolving door at 11:49 p.m. with his conference lanyard still around his neck and a takeout container from the Thai place on Wabash that his colleague had recommended that morning. He was 45. He had been staying at this hotel since Monday. He knew the lobby well enough by now to navigate it without looking up. He looked up, took in what was happening at the front desk. He had been black in America for 45 years. He didn't need more than a few seconds of context. He set his takeout on the nearest surface and walked toward the desk. Excuse me. He addressed the space between Reed and Pam without particular aggression. I'm a guest here. 3 days. Room 2614. He held up the key card. Can someone explain what's happening? Reed's posture tightened. Sir, this is an internal matter. This is a hotel lobby, Frank said. Nothing in here is internal. His voice was even. The particular evenness of someone who had learned, over a longer career, that measured language landed harder than raised volume. He didn't look at Reed again after that. He looked at Maya. She didn't look at him, but her shoulders just slightly settled. Viewer count, 890. The lobby had become something different from what it had been 40 minutes ago. Reed had noticed. And Reed, noticing, made a choice that revealed something about her more clearly than anything else he'd done that night. He performed. Not for Maya. He had stopped performing for Maya sometime around the 3rd minute. He performed for the lobby. For Roy and Bet in the green velvet chairs. For the family paused near the elevator bank. For the guests filtering in from the revolving door who caught the edges of the scene and stopped. He turned himself slightly sideways, opened his volume another notch. I want to be clear that our verification standards exist to protect every legitimate guest in this building. He said legitimate with the particular care of someone who knows exactly what they're implying and wants deniability on it. That's not something we compromise. Under any circumstances. Roy Langham nodded, small, reflexive. Bet Langham looked at the floor. Frank Okafor's jaw tightened, and then Reed said the thing that made Dina Walsh's hand go completely still on her phone. You know, I'm going to be straightforward with you. He set the clipboard on the counter, folded his arms. The bag, the shoes, all of it. A loose gesture that took in everything about her. We see people try to walk into properties like this with claimed reservations. It happens more than guests realize. And I'd rather have this conversation now than Reed. Her voice, not loud. Not the voice of someone who had lost control of something. The voice of someone placing an object down on a surface and wanting it to stay. Stop. He stopped. Something in the lobby shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, but the way air pressure shifts when a window opens in a closed room. Something moving that hadn't been moving before. Maya checked the time. 11:52 p.m. 8 minutes. She knew this part of the evening the way she knew the flight from New York. 8 minutes until the call she had been working toward for 8 months. Meridian Group out of Dallas. A logistics partnership that would anchor the company's Midwest expansion through the end of the decade. $200 million. The kind of agreement that didn't reschedule. She needed to be in a quiet room with good reception. 8 minutes. And Reed Garner had his phone out. She watched him dial. Watched him raise it to his ear with the expression of a man executing exactly the right professional response to a difficult situation. "Yes," he said. "I'm calling from Sterling Crown Hotel on Michigan Avenue. We have a situation that require assistance." He was calling the police. Not threatening it, actually doing it. Maya let out a slow breath through her nose. She was not afraid. That was not the feeling. The feeling was something colder and more structural. The recognition was what this moment meant as a data point. What it said about the culture of this building. What it would mean for the 31 guests whose complaints had gone unanswered. For the 9 who had left early and said nothing further because they'd assumed no one would listen. She had come here to see what was real. This was real. Pam turned to Tara. "Go ahead and release the penthouse. We'll open it for other bookings." Tara's hands went to the keyboard and stopped, stayed there, fingers above the keys. Not typing. Pam looked at her. Tara swallowed, looked at the screen, looked at Reed, still on the phone across the lobby, looked at Maya. Pam. Voice was quiet, held together with visible effort. "I need to show you something before we do that. In the back. It'll take 1 minute." Pam looked at her, with the expression of a person determining whether this was worth the interruption. 1 minute, Tara said again. She didn't look away. Pam made a short sound of impatience and moved toward the back office. Tara got up from her desk and followed. The door closed behind them, and it was just Reed now, finishing his call, returning his phone to his jacket pocket with the satisfied precision of someone who believes they have handled something correctly. And Darius, in the corner, very still, reading something on his phone with an expression that had gone somewhere quiet and complicated. And Frank Okafor near the desk, arms loose at his sides, watching. And Dina Walsh in the corner, camera running, viewer count climbing toward 2,400. And Roy and Bet Langham in the green velvet chairs, Roy's hand resting on his knee. Bet looking at the floor with the expression of someone in the middle of a private reckoning. And Maya Caldwell in the center of all of it. Bag on her shoulder, sneakers on the marble, but completely still. She checked her one more time. 11:53 p.m. 7 minutes. And behind the closed back office door, a 24-year-old woman was standing in front of a screen, trying to decide who she wanted to be. Dina Walsh lowered her phone an inch, looked at the lobby, at all of it, and whispered into the camera, not for effect, just because it was the only true thing she had right now. "Y'all, something very big is about to happen." 7 minutes. That was all she had. And Reed Garner was standing in the middle of the lobby like a man who had just done something righteous. The back office door was closed. Whatever Tara was saying behind that frosted glass panel, it was taking longer than 1 minute. Maya could see 2 shapes through the glass, neither of them moving much. One of them, Pam, had gone very still, in the way that people go still when they are reading something they weren't prepared to read. Reed had noticed the door too. He glanced at it, then back at Maya, then at the guests who had gathered in the ambient way that people gathered around anything that looked like it might resolve itself loudly. And here's what Reed did with audience. He used it, not consciously maybe, not with the deliberate calculation of someone who had thought it through, but with the deep, practiced instinct of a man who had spent years in Rousseau's, where read on things went unchallenged, and who had come to understand, somewhere below the level of articulated thought, that authority needed witnesses to stay warm. He turned slightly sideways, found his angle. Let his voice open up another register. "I want to be clear about something," he said, addressing the space between Maya and the watching guests, with the confidence of someone who believed the room was still his. The standards we maintain here exist for everyone's benefit. Every legitimate guest who walks through that door deserves to know that this property takes security seriously. He said legitimate the way someone says a word when they know exactly what they mean by it and want the option of claiming they meant something else. Roy Langham, in the green velvet chair, gave a small nod. Bet looked at her hands. Frank Okafor, still standing near the desk, said nothing. But something in his posture changed. A subtle settling, the way a person settles when they have decided to stay somewhere instead of leaving. Maya watched Reed perform. She had seen this before. Not in this lobby, not with this particular man, but she had seen this architecture of assumed authority, this specific way of using a room as a mirror that reflected back exactly what you needed to see. The confidence that came not from being right, but from never having been seriously challenged. From occupying spaces that had always agreed with you, that had arranged themselves without anyone quite deciding to arrange them, so that your instincts were all as validated and your errors were absorbed quietly, and your version of events was always the one that got written down. She let him talk, because every sentence he added was a sentence she would remember exactly. And because the longer he talked, the more visible the thing underneath became, not just to her, to the room. Then he said the thing that made Dina Walsh stop breathing for half a second. He turned to look at Maya with the expression of a man who had decided that directness was a virtue. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. He set the clipboard on the counter, crossed his arms. The bag, the shoes. I've been doing this for 8 years, and there are things you learn to read. I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm trying to explain why this isn't going to work out the way you're hoping. Maya looked at him. Reed. Just his name. Not sharp, not loud. The way you say a name when you want someone to understand that you have been paying very careful attention. He stopped, and something shifted in the lobby again. Harder this time, more definite. The way something shifts when a sound you've been hearing finally stops and you realize only see in the silence how loud it had been. Frank Okafor uncrossed his arms. Bet Langham looked up for hands for the first time in several minutes. Dina Walsh, in the corner, tilted her phone a fraction to the left to get a better angle. She still hadn't said anything into the camera. She understood, with the instinct of someone who had spent years documenting things. That narration would only get away right now. Viewer count 100. The comments were moving too fast to read individually. She caught the word wrong more than once. She saw the name of the hotel. She caught that name spreading. Darius Webb had been standing in the corner for 4 minutes, reading, then rereading. The HR portal loaded slowly on his phone, which was a frustration he was used to, and he had navigated to section 14.3 and read it through once at normal speed, and then once more slowly, paying attention to the specific language. Then he did something he had planned on doing. He scrolled to a contact he almost never called outside business hours. Janet Cole. Regional Prejudice Director, 4 Midwest properties under her oversight, including this one. He pressed call, 11:53 p.m. on a Tuesday. It rang twice. Darius. Her voice was alert in the way that meant she had not been asleep. What's on? I need to verify something about the Chicago property, he said, keeping his voice below carrying distance, angled toward the wall. Ownership structure. Whether anything changed in the past 12 months at the senior level. A pause on her end. Why are you calling me about this at midnight? Because I need to know right now. A shorter pause. And then Janet told him. 3 sentences. Darius listened to all 3 without interrupting. He thanked her. He ended the call. He stood with his phone in his hand and looked at nothing in particular and ran back through the past 14 minutes, the way you run back zigzag point, at which you are trying to locate the exact point at which everything went in the wrong direction, and whether there was a Mozart, any moment where a different choice was available. Then he turned around, looked at Reed, looked at Maya, walked back into the lobby. Reed, his voice carried without being raised. Something's in it that hadn't been there at the start of the shift, not accusation exactly. Something quieter than accusation. The tone of someone who has just received information that changes the shape of everything they're looking at. Reed turned. I know what we're in the middle of. Darius moved closer, dropping his volume so the conversation was between them. That's why I'm saying we need to stop, right now, before anything else happens. Reed looked at him with the expression of a man whose ally has just done something confusing. She's a potential fraud situation. I called it in. You called the police, Darius said. Standard protocol when there's a credible risk of. It's not standard protocol. Measured, and you know that. Reed opened his mouth, closed it. For the first time since Maya had walked through the revolving door, he didn't have a next sentence ready. The pause lasted only a second, but the lobby noticed. 7200. A local Chicago news account had shared the stream. The caption read, "Is this what's happening at a Michigan Avenue hotel right now?" The clip had been viewed 4,000 times in 11 minutes. Pam Odell's phone buzzed in the back office. She looked at the screen. Read the notification. Read it again. Set the phone face down on the desk, then immediately picked it back up and read it a third time. She came out of the office without looking at Tara, who followed her out, and returned to the desk and sat down with her hands in her lap. Not typing, not doing anything, just sitting with the expression of someone who has said the thing they needed to say and is now waiting to find out what it costs. Pam walked directly to Reed, stopped close enough to keep her voice below the room. Maya watched Reed's face while Pam spoke. She had learned to do this, to take in news from the face of the person receiving it rather than the one delivering it. You learned more that way. The unguarded version. The reaction before the performance could reassemble itself. Reed's face moved through several things in rapid succession. Confused first, then a stiffening, the instinctive refusal of information that didn't fit. Then something slower and worse, a recalibration so visible it was almost like watch the ground settle. He looked at Maya. You? He stopped. Tried again. Are you? I'm Maya Caldwell, she said. I've said that several times tonight. He stared at her, and Maya watched the certainty that had carried him through the past 40-plus minutes. The absolute unexamined confidence of a man who had never seriously been wrong in a room like this begin to develop its first real crack. Not collapse, not yet. Just the first crack, which was, she had learned, always where the truth started to come through. 11:57 p.m., 3 minutes. Her phone buzzed in her jacket pocket. She knew without looking. Her assistant confirming the Meridian call, making sure everything was in place. She didn't take the phone out. She looked around the lobby instead, the green velvet chairs, the fireplace still burning, the amber glass 40 feet above, catching the light in the way she had hoped it would when she'd sat in a conference room 9 months ago, arguing for a Vermont glassmaker against a team of people who thought the cost wasn't justifiable. She had built this lobby for a specific reason. Not for the guests who arrived knowing they belonged. For the ones who weren't sure. For the woman in Atlanta who had been told she wasn't the right image. For the version of herself that sat in a cracked mirror Civic in a parking lot and written one sentence in a spiral notebook. She pulled a chair from the waiting area. Sat down. Opened her laptop. Reed stared at her. Waiting. For what? For you to understand what happened tonight. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out that was worth saying, so he closed it again. Frank Okafor moved to the chair nearest Maya, not beside her, not speaking to her, just present. The way someone stands next to a person on a street where something has happened. A simple, legible statement of proximity. Bet Lamb had been looking at the same spot on the floor for several minutes. She was thinking about September. About a Tuesday evening very much like this one. About standing at this same counter and asking a simple question. The way Reed had spoken to her, and the way she had decided on the drive back to the hotel room that she was probably reading into it, that it was probably nothing. That the cost of saying something was higher than the cost of letting it go. She had sent the guest feedback form 3 days later. She had never received a response. She was thinking about that now in a different way than she had thought about it before tonight. Roy put his hand over hers. She didn't look at him. She was looking at Maya. At the way Maya sat in that chair, hoodie, jeans, that battered bag beside her, laptop open. With the composure for someone who had decided a long time ago that no room had the power to make her smaller than she was. Bet pressed her lips together. Not yet, but she was getting there. Pam had moved away from Reed and was standing at the edge of the desk with her phone in both hands, reading something. The color in her face was doing something slow and bad. "Derek," she said, then caught herself. "Raid." Her voice had changed completely. Not the efficient authority of earlier, something rawer underneath it. "I got a notification. Corporate monitoring flagged our location. They're asking about incidents involving guest treatment." She looked up. "They want a report from tonight. Specifically tonight. Specifically this location." Reed's jaw went tight. How would they? "Because it's on social media," Frank said from across the lobby, not unkindly, just as a fact being delivered to someone who needed it. "It's been on social media for 25 minutes. Tens of thousands of people are watching this right now." Reed turned to look at Denna in the corner. Denna didn't lower the phone. 14,000, she said. "Give or take." Reed's face went through something complicated. Darius was reading his phone again. Something new. His expression had settled into a kind of controlled gravity that was different from anything he'd shown earlier in the evening. Raid. Measured. Each word placed carefully. "I'm looking at the complaint log for this location. This isn't the time to." 9 months, Darius says. 47 formal discrimination complaints on record for this property. The lobby was very quiet. 23 of them, Darius continued, are directly tied to interactions during the night shift. He looked up from his phone. 9 guests left the property early, without resolution, without filing anything beyond the initial report. A pause. "I'd read the notes on 4 of them. They said they didn't think anyone would listen." A beat. They were right. Nobody followed up. Reed said nothing. "That's not a coincidence," Darius said. "That's a pattern." The silence that followed was a different kind of silence from the ones that had come before. Not the loaded silence of confrontation, not the tense silence of escalation. The particular silence of a room in which something true has been said out loud for the first time, and everyone is adjusting to the new weight of the air. Roy Langham had stopped nodding. He was looking at his wife. Betty was looking at Maya. 11:59 p.m. 1 minute. Reed turned toward Maya. And for the first time since she had walked through the revolving door, he looked at her without the volume, without the clipboard and the practiced certainty and the performance of professional authority, without any of it. Just a man who had started, slowly, reluctantly, with the specific resistance of someone whose identity had been built on never being this wrong. To understand the shape of what he'd done. "You're not."
He
"Stopped."
not what not.
Maya said. He couldn't finish it, because finishing it required saying out loud what he had assumed. In this lobby, with 14,000 people watching, with Darius's words still in the air and Bet Langham's eyes on the floor, and 9 empty guest files in a system that nobody had opened until tonight. He stood there with the unfinished sentence, and Maya waited. She was good at waiting. Her phone rang at exactly midnight, Meridian Group, Dallas. She looked at the screen, looked at the lobby, at Reed, standing at the edge of the desk, at Pam, who had gone very still, at Frank in the chair beside hers, at Darius near service corridor, at Dina in the corner with the camera still running, at Bet and Roy in the green velvet chairs, Roy's hand still over his wife's. "At all of it," she answered. "This is Maya." She stood, moved 3 steps to the left, finding the pocket of the lobby where the ambient noise dropped and the acoustics were cleanest. She had identified it when she walked in, without quite noting that she was doing it. Old habit. And for the next 7 minutes, she talked about logistics infrastructure in the Midwest, about occupancy projections and operational standards and what the partnership would mean for the company's expansion in year 2 and year 3. She talked about it the way she always talked about the things that mattered to her. clearly without hedging, with the forwards incision of someone who had thought about this longer and harder than anyone else who would be on the call. She did not raise her voice. She did not rush. She did not let the events of the past hour reach her voice in any form that the person in Dallas us questioned. This was also the job, maybe the bigger job, the one that nobody saw the cost of because the whole point was that the cost stayed invisible. The holding of two things at once, the thing that was falling apart and the thing that needed to be built, in the same bodies on the same night, without letting either one contaminate the other. She had been doing that her whole life. 7 minutes later, she ended the call, stood for a moment with the phone in her hand, then turned back to the lobby. Bettet Langham was looking at her. Roy had stopped looking at Reed. Frank Okafor was watching her with the expression of a person who had recalibrated something privately and was still in the process of finishing. Dina had the phone angled slightly differently now. She had shifted at some point in the past 7 minutes, from documenting a confrontation to documenting something she didn't quite have a word for yet. Something that felt more significant than what she'd started recording. U-19,000. Reed was still at the desk. He hadn't moved in 7 minutes. He had nowhere to move to. The police he'd called hadn't arrived, a fact that registered as neither relief nor but simply as information. Pam had withdrawn further toward the back of the desk area. Tara was at her station, hands in her lap, watching. Bet Langham spoke, quietly. But the lobby was quiet enough that it carried. You just... She stopped, looked at the phone in Maya's hand. You just closed a business deal while standing in the middle of all this? Maya looked at her. Did you think I came here just to check in? Bet held her gaze. Something passed between them. Then Tara Brooks stood up. She didn't do it dramatically, didn't clear her throat or wait for a pause, or do any of the things people do when they want to announce that they're about to say something important. She just stood up. The way you stand up when sitting down has become the wrong posture for what you need to do. I need to say something. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't waver. Reed looked at her. Something his expression that might have been warning if he'd had more leverage left. Tara didn't look at Reed. When I ran the name, she said, I saw the record, right away, within 30 seconds. She paused. Maya Caldwell, corporate VIP, level 1. Payment from the company account. 6 nights, $16,800, confirmed 9 months ago. Another pause. It was all there. I saw it. The lobby waited. I didn't say anything. Her hands were flat on the desk in front of her, because Reed was standing right there. And I've been here 11 months. And I've learned. She stopped. I've learned that you don't contradict Reed. That the way things work on this shift is that Reed's situation is the Jeed, and if you push back, you push back, you pay for it later in ways that are hard to describe to anyone who hasn't experienced them. She looked at Maya. That's not an excuse. I'm not offering it as an excuse. I'm just telling you what I did and why I did it. Reed's jaw tightened, and then when I couldn't... Tarza's voice caught slightly. She said it. When sitting there stopped being something I could keep doing, I went and got Pam. I showed her the screen. I told her I didn't think we should proceed. A beat. She told me to close the window. Pam said nothing. I kept it open, Tara said. Silence. I should have said something the moment I saw us, Tara said. And I'm sorry. I'm telling you now because it's the true thing, and I think tonight needs the true things. The lobby was very still. Then Bet Langham said, in a voice so quiet that only the people nearest to her heard it. That email. From September. She looked at Maya, the guest feedback form. I submitted it 3 days after my visit. Her hands were folded in her lap. I came in without my husband. I came to meet a friend for a drink. And the way, she paused, the way I was spoken to, the way I was looked at. She didn't finish the description. She didn't need to. I wrote about it, all of it, in the form. She looked at the email on Maya's screen, the one with the name redacted. That's mine, she said. That's my experience. Roy turned to look at his wife. She didn't look back at him. She was looking at Maya. Her eyes were dry, but there was something in them that had been waiting a long time to be said out loud in where it might actually land. I told myself the form was enough, she said, that I'd done my part. Then I sat in that chair tonight and I watched what was happening and I didn't say a word for 40 minutes. A pause, because she didn't look like someone I needed to help. Her voice broke slightly on the last sentence. I knew what was happening, she said. I've had it happen to me, and I still sat there. Maya looked at Bet Langham for a long moment. At the silk blouse, the folded hands. The expression of a woman who had just said the most honest thing she'd said in months and was feeling all of the discomfort that honest things produced when you'd been avoiding them. You sent the form, Maya said. Nobody followed up. That's a failure that belongs to this property, and to me, not to you. She paused. But you're right about the other part. Bet nodded. Once small, I know, she said. Viewer count, 23,000. Maya closed the laptop, reached into her bag, and pulled out the leather portfolio. She set it on the marble counter with the deliberateness of someone placing down something that has been waiting a long time to be placed down in exactly this spot. She looked at Reed Garner. She looked at Pam Odell. I'd like to show you, she said, who you've been talking to tonight. She opened the portfolio slowly, not for theater, not to make them wait, because she had learned over a long time that the moments people carried with them afterward were never the loud ones. They were the quiet ones. The ones where someone did something small and deliberate and the room understood all at once that the ground had shifted. She placed the first item on the counter, a business card, matte black, clean font, no logo, no embellishment of any kind. Maya Caldwell, Chief Executive Officer, Caldwell Hospitality Group. Reed looked at it, picked it up, set it back down. His face was working through something. The kind of something that moved fast and arrived repeatedly at a destination it didn't want to accept. She placed the second doc beside the cards. An acquisition agreement. 12 pages, the first one visible. Sterling Crown Hotel Group letterhead across the top. Date, March 15, TD 2025. Purchase price, $847 million. Acquiring entity, Caldwell Hospitality Group. Ownership stake transferred, 67%. Reed read the first 4 lines, stopped. Read them again. Pam leaned in from behind his shoulder, read over him. Straightened up very slowly, the way a person straightens when the effort of staying upright has become the only thing available to them. Then Maya turned the iPad around, the internal corporate leadership page, not the public-facing version. The intranet page, accessible only above a certain clearance level, the one that employees at this property could have looked at any time in the past 9 months if they'd had reason to look. A professional photograph. Taken 14 months ago in a conference room in New York. A woman in a navy suit, hands folded on the table, looking directly into the camera with the expression of someone who had answered a great many questions and was prepared to answer more. Same face, same woman, different clothes. The caption, Maya Caldwell, majority shareholder, and Chief Executive Officer, Caldwell Hospitality Group. Sterling Crown Hotel Group acquired March 2025. Reed looked at the photograph, looked at Maya, looked at the photograph. His mouth opened, stayed open. Nothing came out. In the corner, Dina Walsh exhaled a breath she had been holding without realizing it and said very quietly into the phone, She owns the hotel. A pause. She owns the hotel. The viewer count moved from 23,000 to 31,000 in the time it took Maya to set the iPad back on the counter. Then 38,000. Then 44,000. 3 minutes. The lobby made a sound. Not a gasp. Not applause. Not any of the things that happened in stories when a moment like this landed. It was quieter than any of those things. A collective exhale. A shift in the room's pressure. The sound of approximately 20 people understanding the same things at the same moment and adjusting to the new weight of it. Frank Okafor pressed his lips together, nodded once. The slow nod of a man who had suspected something in this direction and was experiencing the particular, complicated satisfaction of being right about the part that mattered, even though being right about it was also in some ways, terrible. Roy Langham sat forward in his chair. Bet Langham had both hands pressed flat against her knees and was looking at Maya with an expression that had moved past surprise into something more personal. Something that had to do with September and a feedback form that nobody had answered. Tara Brooks, behind the desk, looked at the screen in front of her, then at her hands, then at Maya. The expression on her face was not simple. It was guilt and relief tangled together, which was exactly what it should have been for someone honest enough to feel both at once. Darius Webb stood near the service corridor and said nothing. He had known since the call with Janet, had been carrying it for the past 15 minutes, like something heavy in his chest. The weight of knowing, and the separate weight of not having known sooner, and the further weight of what it meant that a phone call at midnight had been required for information that should have been visible. Should have been part of how this building understood itself from the first day of the acquisition. He looked at Maya. She wasn't looking at him. She was watching Reed. Reed Garner was having a specific kind of experience. Maya could see it in real time, not remorse. Remorse was something that came after processing, after sitting with the truth long enough to let it become part of your understanding of yourself. What Reed was having was more immediate and in some ways more disorienting than remorse. He was having the experience of a man who had just discovered that the floor he was standing on was a different material than he'd thought at. That the authority he had been wielding his lobby tonight had a ceiling he hadn't seen. That the story he'd been telling, the 8 years story, the I can read a situation story, the I am protecting this property story, had just been revealed to have an ending written by someone else entirely. He looked at the business card on the counter, looked at the acquisition agreement, looked at the photograph on the iPad, and then, because there was nowhere else to look, he looked at Maya. I didn't. He stopped. You didn't know, she said, and he nodded. A small, stripped-down nod, nothing performed in it. No, she agreed, you didn't. A pause that had real weight in it. That's the point. She opened the laptop, because this was not the end of something. This was the clearing of space for the actual work. The revelation of who she was had changed the room, but it hadn't done what she'd come here to do, and she hadn't come here to be revealed. She had come here to see what needed fixing, and to fix it. The revelation was incidental. It was what happened when a building's culture had degraded far enough that the owner had to walk through the front door in a gray hoodie to understand why the numbers looked the way they looked. She turned the screen toward the lobby. Let me show you what 9 months of complaints looks like when you organize them, she said. The data was clean. Her team had prepared it 2 weeks ago when she'd confirmed the date of this visit. Organized by incident type, by time of day, by which staff member was documented as present, by whether the affected guest had received a follow-up within the required 48-hour window. The first number on the screen, 47. Complaints filed at this location since the acquisition closed. 9 months. Of those 47, 31 had received no follow-up of any kind. Of the remaining 16, 9 had received a templated response. The same 3 sentences, timestamped in batches on Friday afternoons, which told her everything she needed to know about how much care had gone into them. 7 complaints had been marked resolved in the system. She had spoken personally to 4 of those 7 guests in the past month. None of them had used the word resolved to describe what had happened to them. This location, she said, her voice the same as it had been all night, not elevated, not diminished, simply placed, has the lowest guest satisfaction score in our North American portfolio, the highest staff turnover, the most discrimination-related complaints per occupied of any property we own in this country. She let that sit for a moment. I came here tonight because those numbers told me something was wrong, and I wanted to see it directly, without a briefing, without anyone preparing for my arrival. She looked at Reed, then at Pam. Thank you, I've seen it. Pam Odell spoke. Her voice, when it came, had shed everything it had been using all night. The professional efficiency, the practiced authority, the clipped certainty. What was underneath was smaller, more undefended. The voice of a person who has watched things she built her evening on come apart in front of her and is not yet sure what to do with her hands. Mrs. Caldwell. She stopped. The name sounded different now than it had 20 minutes ago when she'd used it with the particular emphasis of someone performing skepticism. If we had known who you were, you would have treated me differently, Maya said. Yes, I know. A beat. That's not a defense. I need you to understand that. Pam opened her mouth. I can see that you think it is, Maya continued. I understand why. From where you're standing, the fact that you would have behaved differently if you'd known makes it feel like there's a distinction, like it draws a line between tonight and your normal conduct. She paused. Here is what I need you to hear. Well, that's what you would have given me if you'd known. Every single one. The man who waited 4 minutes at the far end of that counter, with nobody approaching him. The guest who submitted a feedback form in September and never heard back. The 9 people who left this property early and didn't file anything further because they assumed them to correctly that no one would follow up. She looked at Pam steadily. They deserved the same treatment you would have given a CEO. And they didn't get it, not because you didn't know who they were, because you decided in a few seconds who they weren't. And that decision has a body of evidence behind now that guys is very difficult to cut. The floor. So no, Maya said. Not knowing who I was is not a defense. It is precisely the problem. Roy Langham stood up. It surprised everyone, including, visibly, Bet. He was 66. He had spent 30 years in finance. He had stayed at Sterling Properties on 14 separate occasions over the past decade. He had tipped generously and never complained and told himself when he occasionally noticed things. The extra scrutiny applied to certain guests, the slight temperature difference in how the staff distributed their attention, that he was probably misreading it, that it was the kind of thing a person could rationalize if they were comfortable and not looking for something to be wrong. He had rationalized it more than once. My wife, apology, he said. Not to the room, not to Maya, to Bet. Bet looked up at him. In September, when she came back from her visit here, she told me what happened. He kept his eyes on her. I told her she was probably reading into it. Bet's expression did something complicated and private. I was wrong, Roy said. That was wrong of me, and I'm sorry. The lobby was very quiet. Maya looked at Roy Langham for a moment. Thank you for saying that, she said, and she meant it. Not as a formality. As the acknowledgement of something that was genuinely difficult to say and had been said anyway, which was the only thing that made any of this worth anything. She turned back to Reed and Pam. You have 3 options, she said. I need a decision from each of you before I go upstairs. One finger. Option 1. You resign tonight. Voluntarily. I provide a neutral employment reference. Dates of service, title, no further detail. What happened tonight stays out of your personnel record. You leave with your professional reputation intact and the opportunity to make different choices somewhere else. A second finger. Option 2. Termination for cause. The full incident is documented in your file. Every future employer in this industry who calls for a reference will be told that your employment ended following a formal discrimination complaint. In hospitality, that travels. A third finger. Option 3. Full internal investigation, 3 to 6 months. HR and legal involvement, possibly external review. Your names are attached to this incident documentation that becomes part of the company's permanent compliance record. A pause. Given that this conversation has been watched by approximately 44,000 people tonight,
the question of the public is not entirely within my control.
She lowered her hand. 60 seconds. Nobody moved. The clock above the fireplace made its small sound. Dina had stopped whispering. The camera was running. She understood without thinking about it that this was not a moment for commentary. Darius stood with his arms at his sides. Tara had her hands flat on the desk in front of her. Frank Okafor looked at the ceiling briefly, then back at the counter. Reed was looking at the business card, the small matte rectangle on the marble. He had not touched it again after the first time. 15 seconds. 20. Pam moved first. She reached up and unclipped her name badge from her jacket lapel, set it on the counter. The sound it made was small and very clean. I resign. Her voice held. The particular steadiness of someone who is determined that the only dignity left available to them is in the quality of their exit. She didn't look at Reed. She looked at Maya. "I'm sorry," she said. "I understand that doesn't fix anything." "It doesn't," Maya said. "But I hear you." 40 seconds. 50. Reed was still looking at the card. Then he looked up, not at Maya, at Didda Walsh in the corner, with the phone still raised and the viewer count he couldn't see from where he stood. Then at the lobby, at Roy and Bet, at Frank, at Tara, at all of it. He unclipped his badge, set it beside Pam's, two small rectangles of plastic on the marble counter. He didn't say anything, turned and walked toward the staff area. The lobby exhaled. Dina lowered her phone a few inches, looked at the viewer count, then at Maya. She was going to say something, and then she decided not to, because some moments didn't need anyone adding to them. Maya turned to Darius. "You called Janet at midnight," Isaacta said. "Yes, before you'd confirmed anything, just because something didn't feel right." "Yes. Why?" He thought about it honestly. "Because I've been doing this long enough to know that you check before you act, that the cost of checking is always lower than the cost of not checking." He paused. "I should have applied that same principle to the complaint log. I had access to the same system. I didn't look." "No," she agreed. He held that. "What you do with that is your work," she said. "Not mine. But the fact that you're saying it without me asking tells me something." She looked at him. "Interim management of this location effective tomorrow morning. You'll report directly to Janet. I'll be on a call with both of you at 9 a.m. Darius blinked. Once. "I'm not firing you," she said. The opposite. She turned to Tara. Tara was already looking at her, had been looking at her for a while now. Her face was open in the way that faces got, when a person had already decided that Matsi Sauce Dusk was the only available strategy, and was waiting to find out what Mama cost them. "You saw the record the moment you ran my name," Maya said. "Yes, you didn't say anything." "No, and then you did." Tara looked at her hands. Then back up, almost too late. But not too late. A pause. "You went and got Pam when sitting there stopped see something you could keep doing," Maya said. "You showed her the screen and you didn't let it go even when she told you to close the window." She paused. "That took more than people will understand who weren't in that room. I should have done it 20 minutes earlier." "Yes, and you'll know that for the rest of your career." Maya looked at her steadily. "Probation, 90 days. You'll go through the full retraining program, guest dignity standards, conflict escalation, bias awareness. At the end of it, I'll review your file personally." Tara nodded. "Thank you," she said. "Then, I won't let it go again." "I know," Maya said. "That's why you're staying." Dina Walsh packed up her things slowly. She had been in this lobby for close to 2 hours. Her friend had texted 40 minutes ago to say she'd fallen asleep. She was sorry. Could they do breakfast? Dina hadn't do because she had been otherwise occupied. She stood, zipped her bag, started for the exit, stopped when Maya said her name. She turned around. Maya was crossing the lobby toward her, not hurrying. "You didn't editorialize," Maya said. "The entire time. You just let it be what it was." Dina shrugged. "It didn't need me explaining it. It was already enough." That's a real skill. Rarer than it sounds. "I'm just someone with a phone. You're someone with a phone and the judgment to know when to point it and when to stay quiet," Maya said. 44,000 people trusted you to show something true tonight. And you did. She reached into the portfolio and produced a card, smaller than the CEO card. A name and a number, written by hand. "This is Renata," Maya said. "She runs communications for the group. She's trying to find someone with real instincts for 8 months. She held the offering you a job. So I'm saying you should have a conversation." Dina looked at the card. "I don't have a resume that would make sense to anyone." "Renata doesn't hire from resumes," Maya said. "She hires from judgment. You've got it." Dina took the card, turned it over. "Why are you doing this?" "Not suspicious. Genuinely wanting to know." Maya considered it. Because you showed up tonight, she said, and you showed up correctly. And in my experience, that's harder than it looks and rarer than it should be. It was 12:47 a.m. when Reed Garner came back. Nobody had expected it. He had gone in staff area to collect his things 40 minutes ago, and the reasonable assumption, the one everyone in the lobby had made without discussing it, was that he would leave through the set service exit, and that would be the end of his presence in this story. But the front doors turned, and he came back through. He had taken off the suit jacket. He was in a white button-down now, carrying the jacket over one arm. Without doubt, it looked younger. More like a person and less like a role he had been playing for so long he'd forgotten it was a role. Darius moved slightly. Old instinct, then held. Reed stopped in the middle of the lobby. He looked at Maya. She waited. "I need to say something," he said, "and I need you to know I'm not here to ask you for anything. Not my job back, not a reference, not anything." "Okay," she said. He looked at the floor for a moment. Then back up. "The way I looked at you when you walked in tonight," he said. "The decision I made in the first 3 seconds. I need you to know that I know, standing here right now, that it had nothing to do with verification protocol or guest security or any of the things I kept saying." He stopped, restarted. "It was about what I saw and what I assumed from what I saw. And need to say that out loud because I've been." He looked at the desk, at the counter, at the spot where his badge had been. "I've spent 3 years telling myself that my instincts about people were professional, that reading a situation fast was a skill, that I was good at it." He looked at her. "I was reading something else," he said. "I've been reading it for a long time, and I don't think I let myself know that until tonight." The lobby waited. "You're not the first person I treated that way," he said. "You're just the first one who could prove it." Silence. "I know that saying this doesn't fix anything." "No," Maya said, "it doesn't. I know." A pause that lasted several seconds. "But you came back to say it," she said. He looked at her. "That's the first true thing you've said tonight," she said. "Not the most important thing. Not something that changes what's in those complaint files. But the first true thing." He didn't look away. Didn't reach for anything. Didn't try to make it more than it was. He stood there with it. Then he nodded. Once. Turned, and walked back out through the front doors into the Chicago night. Nobody spoke for a moment, because some things need a moment before they could become the next thing. Bet Langham stood up. She had been waiting to since he'd walked back through the door. Not because his return had prompted it. Because something in this entire evening had been building toward it, and his return had clarified for her that there was no later. That later was a habit she had already spent too much of her life indulging. She crossed the lobby to Maya. "I want to say something," she said. "Okay, in September," she stopped. Guleil's the precision of someone who has decided to be exact about this. "I came in without Roy. I came to meet a friend for a drink, and the way Reed spoke to me," she shook her head once. "It wasn't subtle. I knew exactly what it was. I've known what that looks like my whole life." Maya was still. "I sent the feedback form," Betty said. 3 days later, I wrote down everything, and then I told myself that was enough, that I'd done my part." Her voice shifted slightly. "And tonight I sat in that chair, and I watched what was happening to you, and I said nothing for 40 minutes. Because paused.
Because you needed things you tell only point for.
And I need to say that out loud because it's the true thing, and I think tonight has been about the true thing. Maya looked at her for a long moment. "You sent the form?" "Use the form," she said. "We didn't follow up. That's a failure that belongs to this property and to me. You did what the system asked, and the system didn't respond." A pause. "But you're right about the other part." "I know I am." "You spoke tonight," Maya said. "When it started to cost you something. When Roy was sitting right there and the room was watching." She paused. "I'm not telling you that balances it. You already know it doesn't." Bet nodded. "But it matters," Masa said. "And I think you know the difference between the two." Bet looked at her. "Next time," she said. It wasn't a question. Next time I agreed. You don't wait for the person to be powerful enough to make it safe. You speak because it's right. That's the only version that actually means anything. Bet pressed her lips together. Her eyes were dry, but the effort of keeping them that way was visible. Turned back toward Roy, who had been watching from the chairs with the expression of a man who was in the middle of learning something about himself that he hadn't expected to learn tonight and was taking it seriously. Darius walked with Maya to the elevator at 12:53 a.m. In the corridor, away from the lobby, he stopped. I should have caught this earlier, he said. The pattern in the complaint log, the numbers. It was all there and I had access to the same system, and I told myself it wasn't my lane because Reed ran the shift and my jurisdiction was security. He looked at the wall. That's not a good reason. No, she said. I'm saying it because I think you should know I know that. Not because I'm hoping it changes anything. She looked at him. Changes what I think the next 12 months look like, she said. Which matters more? He was quiet. The people who help me fix things, she said, are not the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who name the mistake and then do the harder work of not repeating it. She held his gaze. I think you're one of those people. That's why I'm keeping you. At 2 a.m., the elevator doors opened onto the 45th floor. The penthouse foyer was dim and warm, floor-to-ceiling windows. Lake Michigan below in the dark, the city lights scattered at its edges. A fireplace in the corner, smaller than the one in the lobby. A desk near the window with the kind of lamp that gave good working light. Maya had designed this room for someone who needed to work late in a city that wasn't home. She set her bag down on the chair by the door. The worn leather messenger. The strap she had repaired twice, 'cause replacing it felt like admitting something she wasn't ready to admit. She stood at the window. The lake was invisible in the dark, but she knew it was there. Could feel the quality of the darkness at that particular edge of the city. The specific absence of lights where the water began. She was not running through the evening, not cataloging it or composing the email she'd send to legal in the morning or thinking about the 3 other properties she needed to visit before the end of the month. She was thinking about the woman in the parking lot in Atlanta, the cracked mirror, the cold engine, the pen in her hand. She pulled out her phone, opened her notes, typed 3 words, tonight was necessary, closed the app, pulled the desk chair to the window, and went to work. 3 months later. Sterling, Crown, Chicago. March 14, 2026. The eve of the acquisition's 1-year anniversary. The guest satisfaction rating across all major platforms 4.7 out of 5. Revenue for February. The highest single month in the property's 22-year history. Staff turnover for the first quarter. 11%, down from 899. Formal complaint since January 1st, 0. Zipple. Darius Webb arrived at 7:45 every morning without anyone asking him to. He had spent the first month after December in one-on-one conversations with every department, not evaluating, just listening. What did they need? What made it hard to do their jobs right? What did they stop themselves from saying and why? He had changed 3 policies and flagged 4 more for review. By March, he was the kind of manager that newer employees heard about on their first day. Not as a warning, not as someone to be careful around, but as someone who would listen if you came to them with the true thing. Tara Brooks had completed the retraining program in January and been recommended for a leadership track by the program director without anyone prompting the recommendation. She had been promoted to senior front desk supervisor in late February, 11 months ahead of what the standard track would have suggested. She was 24 years old. She had been in hospitality for 14 months. She had become, without trying to become it, the person newer employees came to when they weren't sure what the right thing was. Her answer each time was the same. Figure out what the right thing is first, then figure out how to do it. On the morning of March 14th, a new hire named Garrett started his first shift, 23 years old. Good instincts, his interview note said. Eager, the kind of eagerness that could go either way, depending on the environment it landed in. at the front desk with Tara at 8:20 a.m. when a man came through the revolving doors, mid-40s, baseball cap, jeans worn through at the left knee, a duffel bag held together at the broken zipper by a bungee cord looped twice around the top. Garrett looked at the man. His hands moved toward the desk phone out of an instinct he hadn't examined yet. What? Tara saw his hands move. "What do you see?" she asked. He looked at her. Then back at the man who had stopped near the entrances to get his bzings. "I don't." He stopped. "I don't know. I don't know anything about him." "Right," Tara said. He looked at her. "So," she said. He thought about it. Not for long. Long enough. He straightened up, so stepped around to the desk and toward the engineer's hips. "Good morning," he said. "Welcome to Sterling Brown. Can I help you find your way?" The man looked at him, looked at the lobby, looked back at Garrett with the expression of someone who had walked into enough lobbies to know that this was not always how it began. "I've got a reservation," the man said. 2 nights. Name's Foster." "Of course," Garrett said. "Let me get you taken care of." Tara stepped back. "Let him die it." Said nothing. Maya Caldwell was standing near the fireplace. She had come in through the revolving door 22 minutes ago. Gray hoodie, jean, canvas sneakers. A newer pair now because the old ones had finally come apart somewhere around the 3rd week of January, and she had stood over the trash can for a moment before dropping them in, which was longer than made sense. But there it was. Nobody had recognized her. Nobody had any reason to. She had stood near the fireplace, actually burning on this cold March morning, the way she had specified it should burn on cold mornings, and watched the shift change. Had watched Darius move through the lobby, greeting arriving guests by name. Had watched the staff move with the particular ease of people who worked in a place that treated them like they were capable of being good, which had made them good, which had made them behave that way, even in the spaces between observed moments, especially then. She had watched Garrett's hands move toward the phone, had watched him stop and think and choose differently, had watched Tara let him arrive at the answer instead of handing it to him, had watched the man with the bungee cord smile the way people smiled when they had been braced for one thing and received another. She picked up her bag, walked to the revolving door. At the threshold, she paused, turned back. The lobby, the white marble. The amber glass, 40 feet up, the morning light moving through it differently than the night light had. The fireplace, the green velvet chairs. Garrett at the desk, pulling up a reservation, with the focused attention of someone doing a thing for the first time and wanting to do it right. The man with the bungee cord, watching him work, relaxed in the way that people relaxed when they had stopped waiting to be made unwelcome. She turned back to the door, pushed through, out into the cold Michigan Avenue morning, the lake invisible from here but there, somewhere beyond the buildings, doing what it always did. She walked. Detroit on Thursday, Philadelphia the following Monday. New York after flagged, 3 expecting an executive visitor in a suit with a car service sometime in the next quarter. None of them knew she was already on her way. The notebook in her bag was the 24th one. She opened it as she walked, found a clean page, wrote the same thing she always wrote on the first page of a new notebook. 1 sentence, the same one. You only see the truth when people don't know you're looking. She tucked the pen back into the spiral and kept walking. Just a woman in a gray hoodie, moving through a cold city, going somewhere. No one knew where. No one needed to. She knew. And that had always been enough.